David Park had been alone in the Alaskan wilderness for 3 weeks when the light came down from the sky. He was a wildlife photographer now, but before that, he had been a soldier. 8 years in the Army Rangers had taught him how to survive in places where most men would die. After leaving the military, he found peace in nature. He spent months alone in the wild, taking pictures of wolves and bears and eagles. The silence of the forest was better than the noise of war that still lived inside his head. That night, he sat by his small fire, cooking fish he had caught from the river. The stars were bright and clear. Then, one of the stars moved. It grew bigger and brighter until David realized it was not a star at all. It was something else. Something coming down. The light hit him before he could move. His body went stiff. He could not run. He could not even breathe. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was a shape moving toward him through the trees. It was tall, much taller than any man. When David woke up, he was not on Earth anymore. He was lying on a cold metal floor in a room with no windows. The walls were smooth and gray. Strange symbols glowed on the ceiling in a language he did not understand. His head hurt and his mouth was dry, but he forced himself to sit up and look around. His gear was gone. His camera, his tent, his rifle all had taken. But when he checked his belt, he found 2 things they had left him. His survival knife, still in its leather case, and his pistol, a 9mm handgun he always carried for protection against bears. He pulled out the magazine and counted. 30 rounds. 15 in the magazine, 15 more in a pouch on his belt. The door opened with a hiss of air. David jumped to his feet, his hand on his knife. The creature that walked in was like nothing he had ever seen. It stood 8 feet tall on 2 powerful legs. Its skin was covered in dark green scales that looked as hard as armor. Its head was long and flat, like a crocodile, with rows of sharp teeth visible even when its mouth was closed. Yellow eyes with vertical pupils stared down at David with cold intelligence. Behind the first creature came 2 more. They were smaller, but just as terrifying. They carried weapons that looked like rifles, but made of metal and crystal that glowed with soft light. The first creature spoke. Its voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. The words meant nothing to David at first, but then a small device on the creature's chest blinked, and suddenly David could understand. "Human," the creature said. "I am Crix, High Elder of the Varath. You have been chosen for a great honor." David said nothing. He kept his back to the wall and his eyes on all 3 aliens. Crix continued speaking. "My people are hunters. For 10,000 years, we have been the apex predators of this galaxy. We have hunted every species on every world. We have killed creatures that would make your Earth animals look like insects. But lately, we have grown bored. The prey is too easy. There is no challenge anymore." One of the smaller Vorath made a sound that might have been laughter. "Then we found your world," Crix said. "Earth, such a small planet. Such weak creatures. Soft skin, no claws. No armor. We thought humans would be the most boring prey of all." The alien's yellow eyes narrowed. "But we were curious. Your species has spread across your planet. You have killed each other in great wars. You hunt animals much larger and stronger than yourselves. This interested us." Crix took a step closer. David did not back away. "So we have decided to test you," the alien said. "You will be taken to Thalok 7. It is a jungle world. Very dangerous. Many things that want to eat you. 20 of our best hunters will track you across the planet. You will have 7 days to survive. If you live until the end of the 7th day, you earn your freedom. We will return you to Earth and never bother your people again." David finally spoke. His voice was calm and steady. "And if I die? Then you die," Crix said simply. "That is the way of the hunt. The strong survive, The weak become food. The alien showed its teeth in what might have been a smile. No prey species has ever survived more than 2 days. Most die in the first few hours. But perhaps you will surprise us. David looked at the knife on his belt. Then at the pistol. 30 rounds against 20 alien hunters on an unknown world. Why leave me weapons? He asked. Crix made a strange sound in its throat. Because it makes the hunt more interesting. A prey that cannot fight back is no fun. Do not worry, human. Your little weapons will not help you. Our scales can stop most projectiles. Our claws can cut through metal. We can see heat and smell fear from a great distance. You have no chance. The two smaller Vareth made that laughing sound again. David looked at Crix for a long moment. Then, slowly he smiled. The aliens stopped laughing. They looked at each other with confusion. Why do you smile, human? Crix asked. Do you not understand? You are going to die. David's smile did not go away. I understand perfectly. You've been hunting easy prey for so long that you've forgotten what a real hunt feels like. You think because I don't have claws or scales that I'm weak. You think 30 rounds and a knife aren't enough. He took a step toward Crix. The guards raised their weapons. But David kept talking. My people have been killing things bigger and stronger than us for 200,000 years. We hunted mammoths with wooden spears. We killed lions with rocks and fire. We didn't survive because we were the strongest. We survived because when something tried to kill us, we found a way to kill it first. David met the alien's yellow eyes without fear. You want to hunt? Fine. Take me to your jungle. Release your hunters. But remember this moment, Crix. Remember that I warned you. Because in 7 days, you're going to learn why humans became the apex predators of Earth. Crix stared at him for a long moment. Then the alien turned and walked out of the room. Prepare him for transport, Crix said to the guards. This one might actually be entertaining. The door closed, and David was alone again. He sat down on the cold floor and began to check his knife. The blade was sharp. The handle was solid. 30 rounds, and a knife. It would have to be enough. The shuttle dropped David on Thalax 7, just as the sun was rising. The alien sky was orange and red, with 2 small moons still visible near the horizon. The air was thick and hot and wet, like breathing through a warm cloth. Strange smells filled his noseplants and rot and something, sharp like copper. The jungle around him was unlike anything on Earth. The trees were massive, with trunks as wide as houses and branches that blocked most of the sky. Lines as thick as his arm hung everywhere. The leaves were not green but deep purple and blue, and some of them moved on their own even when there was no wind. Strange sounds came from every direction. Clicks and whistles and low rumbling noises that made the ground shake. David did not waste time looking at the scenery. The moment the shuttle flew away, he started moving. The Vareth had given him a 1-hour head start. That was how confident they were. 1 hour before 20 hunters would begin tracking him. 1 hour to find shelter, study the terrain, and make a plan. David moved fast but careful. He watched where he put his feet. He looked for tracks and signs of danger. He tested plants before touching them, remembering how many things on Earth could poison a man just from contact with skin. This was not Earth, and he had to assume everything here could kill him. After 30 minutes, he found what he was looking for, a small stream running down from higher ground. Water meant life, and life meant tracks. If the Vareth were smart hunters, they would follow water sources. David followed the stream uphill until he found a rocky area where the water came from underground. Here, there were no tracks, no trails. The rocks were hard to walk on, but that was exactly what he wanted. He spent his remaining time studying the area. He found a narrow passage between 2 large boulders, a good place for an ambush. He found vines that were strong enough to hold weight. He found a plant with thorns that oozed something that smelled bad, probably poison. He made mental notes of everything. Then the hour was up, and the hunt began. David heard them before he saw them. The Vorath were not trying to be quiet. They crashed through the jungle like they owned it, making loud calls to each other. They were laughing and joking, excited for the sport. To them, this was fun. This was entertainment. David sat in the branches of a tree, hidden by the purple leaves, and watched 4 Vorath hunters pass below him. They were bigger than Crix, younger and stronger, with fresh scars on their scales that showed they had fought and won many battles. They carried those glowing weapons, but also long knives and what looked like nets. They were looking for heat. David remembered what Crix had said. They could see heat and smell fear. So David had covered himself in mud from the stream and wrapped wet leaves around his body. The mud was cold and made him invisible to their heat vision. And he was not afraid. Fear was just another feeling, and David had learned long ago how to control his feelings. The 4 hunters moved past his tree and continued into the jungle. They were following the stream, just as David had expected. He waited until they were far enough away, then dropped silently from the tree and followed them. For 3 hours, David watched and learned. He saw how they communicated with hand signals. He saw how they stopped to check the ground for tracks. He saw how they spread out when moving through open areas, but bunched together in tight spaces. He saw their weaknesses. They were overconfident. They never looked up. They never checked behind them. They assumed they were the hunters, not the hunted. That assumption would kill them. As the sun began to set, the 4 Vorath made camp in a small clearing. They did not build a fire. They did not need one. Their scales kept them warm. They ate dried meat from pouches on their belts and talked about the hunt. One of them complained that the human was taking too long to find. Another said maybe the human had already been killed by some jungle creature and robbed them of their sport. David listened from the shadows, close enough to hear every word through their translator devices. When 3 of them settled down to sleep and 1 stood guard, David made his move. He had spent an hour preparing. A vine stretched across the path, ankle height, invisible in the darkness. Sharpened sticks hidden in a hole, covered with leaves. A heavy branch balanced on a rock, ready to fall. David threw a stone into the jungle on the far side of the camp. The guard turned toward the sound, weapon raised. In that moment, David moved out of the shadows, silent as smoke. The knife went into the guard's throat, into the soft tissue under the jaw where there were no scales. The alien tried to scream but could not. David lowered the body to the ground without a sound and took the guard's communication device. Then he melted back into the jungle. He did not go far. He found a position behind a fallen tree and waited. An hour later, one of the sleeping Vorath woke up to relieve the guard. He found the body. His roar of shock and rage echoed through the jungle. The other 2 hunters jumped up, weapons ready. They shouted at each other, confused and angry. One of them ran into the jungle to search for the killer. He hit the vine David had set up. He fell forward. He landed on the sharpened sticks. His scream was short. The remaining 2 hunters stood back to back in the clearing, weapons pointed at the darkness. They were not laughing anymore. They were not joking. For the first time in their lives, they were feeling something they had never felt on a hunt before. Fear. David watched them from the shadows. He had not fired a single bullet. 2 dead. 18 to go. The 2 survivors tried to call for help on their communication devices. David listened on the device he had taken. He heard them report what happened. He heard the other hunting parties respond with disbelief. He heard Vorn, the lead hunter, tell everyone to stay in groups of 4 and keep their eyes open. But David also heard something else. He heard the doubt in their voices. He heard the fear starting to grow as the night went on. The two surviving hunters stayed in their clearing, too afraid to move. They waited for morning. They waited for help. But help was far away, and the jungle was dark. And somewhere out there was a human with a knife who had just taught them something they would never forget. On this world, in this hunt, nothing was certain anymore. When the first light of dawn came through the trees, David was already gone. He had moved to higher ground, to a position where he could watch the jungle below. He cleaned his knife and checked his pistol. Still 30 rounds. He had not needed them yet. Below him, he could see the Varath spreading out across the jungle, searching for him. They were being more careful now. They were looking up into the trees. They were checking their backs. But they were also scared, and scared hunters made mistakes. David smiled and began to plan his next move. The hunt was only beginning. By the second day, David had learned enough of the Varath language to understand simple words. The communication device he had taken from the dead guard let him listen to everything the hunters said to each other. He heard their confusion. He heard their fear. And he used it. On the second night, David did not kill anyone. Instead, he did something worse. The Varath had split into smaller groups of 4, spread across the jungle to search for him. David found one of their camps while they slept. 2 guards were awake, watching the darkness with nervous eyes. David waited until both guards were looking the wrong way, then slipped into the camp like a ghost. He did not touch the sleeping hunters. He did not take their weapons. Instead, he used his knife to carve a symbol into the tree above where they slept. It was a simple shape, a circle with a line through it. It meant nothing, but when the hunters woke up and saw it, they would know that he had been there. He had been close enough to kill them all, and he had chosen not to. He did the same thing at 3 other camps that night. By morning, the Varath were terrified. They gathered together in one large group, abandoning their spread-out search pattern. They screamed at each other about how the human could have gotten past their guards. Some of them wanted to call Crix and ask for help. Others said that would be shameful. They were 20 hunters against 1 soft human. They should be able to kill him easily, but nothing about this hunt was easy anymore. David watched them argue from his hiding spot high in the trees. He had not slept in 2 days, but he was used to that. In the ranges, they had trained him to fight for days without rest. His body was tired, but his mind was sharp. And his mind told him that the best weapon against these aliens was not his knife or his gun. It was fear itself. That night, David began to whisper. The Varath had good hearing. Very good hearing. David used that against them. He moved through the jungle around their camp, staying far enough away that they could not see him, but close enough that they could hear his voice. He used the words he had learned from listening to them. Simple words. Death, blood, coming, behind you. He whispered them over and over, moving around the camp so the sound came from different directions. The hunters jumped up and fired their weapons into the darkness, hitting nothing. They spun around at every sound. They stopped trusting each other. One young hunter, a female named Tira, started screaming that there was something wrong. "This is not prey," she shouted. "Prey runs. Prey hides. This human hunts us. We are the prey now." The others told her to be quiet, but David could see they were thinking the same thing. On the 3rd day, David started taking things. While the hunters searched one area, David circled around and found the supplies they had left behind. He took food. He took water pouches. He took anything he could carry quietly. He left behind only the wrappers and containers, placed in neat piles so they would know he had been there. When the hunters returned and found their supplies gone, they lost control. 2 of them started fighting each other, blaming one another for not watching the camp. Vorn, the lead hunter, had to break them apart. "We must stay calm," Vorn said, but even his voice was shaking. "It is just one human. He cannot kill us all." But David could hear the doubt in those words. And so could the other hunters. That night, David used his first bullets. He found a group of 3 hunters moving through the jungle, trying to find a new camp location. He climbed a tree about 200 meters away and waited. When they stopped to rest, he aimed carefully at the one in the middle. The shot was clean. The Vorath dropped without a sound. The other 2 spun around, looking for the shooter, but David was already moving. He fired twice more as he ran. One shot hit a hunter in the leg. The other missed. But missing was fine. The point was not to kill all of them. The point was to show them that death could come from anywhere, at any time. The wounded hunter screamed for help on his communication device. David listened as other groups reported hearing the shots. They were all far away. The jungle was huge, and David had been leading them in circles for days. Help would take hours to arrive. David circled back and found the wounded hunter trying to drag himself toward his dead friend. The other survivor was gone. He had run away, leaving his companion behind. David felt no joy in what he did next, but he felt no guilt either. This was survival. The wounded Vorath died quickly, a knife to the throat. David took his communication device and his food and disappeared into the jungle. By the 4th day, 8 Vorath were dead. David had used only 12 bullets. The remaining hunters were broken. They did not sleep. They did not eat properly. They jumped at every sound. Some of them wanted to give up and call for emergency evacuation, but Vorn refused. He said the shame would be too great. They were Vorath. They were apex predators. They could not lose to a single human. But Vorn was wrong, and deep down, he knew it. David could have killed more of them. He had opportunities, but he was playing a longer game. He wanted them tired. He wanted them scared. He wanted them so broken that when the time came for the final fight, they would already be beaten in their minds. Humans have been using these tactics for thousands of years. Long before they had guns or bombs, humans had learned that the mind was the first battlefield. Break the enemy's spirit, and the body would follow. On the 4th night, David allowed himself to sleep for a few hours. He found a hidden cave behind a waterfall and blocked the entrance with rocks. Even if the Vorath found him, they would have to come through one at a time, easy targets. He dreamed of home. He dreamed of Alaska, of the cold, clean air and the quiet forest. He dreamed of his camera and the wolf pack he had been photographing before all this began. When he woke up, the sun was rising and the jungle was quiet. Too quiet. David grabbed his knife and pistol and moved to the cave entrance. He listened carefully but heard nothing. No birds, no insects, no distant sounds of Vorath hunters. Something was wrong. He pushed aside the rocks and stepped outside. The jungle was empty. The hunters were gone. For a moment, David wondered if they had given up. If they had finally decided the shame of losing was better than dying. But then he heard a new sound, the roar of engines high above the trees. He looked up and saw ships. Not one shuttle, but 5. Big ships, carrying many more hunters. Crix had sent reinforcements. David smiled, even though his heart was beating fast. So the Vorath had learned some fear. Good. But they had made another mistake. They thought more hunters would solve the problem. They thought numbers would make them safe. They were wrong. David checked his pistol. 18 rounds left. His knife was sharp. His body was tired but strong. His mind was clear. Let them come, he thought. Let them all come. He would show them what a human could do. The reinforcements changed everything. 30 new Vorath hunters dropped from the sky, armed with plasma rifles and thermal tracking equipment that was much more advanced than what the original 20 had carried. They wore heavy armor on their chests and backs. They moved in tight formations, covering each other constantly. These were not sport hunters looking for fun. These were soldiers. Crix himself came down with them. David watched from his hiding spot as the High Elder walked through the jungle like he owned it. Crix was furious. David could see it in the way the alien moved, in the sharp way he spoke to his hunters. 8 of the original 20 were dead. The survivors looked broken and ashamed. They could not meet Crix's eyes. "You told me this would be easy," David heard one of the original hunters say through the communication device. "You told me humans were weak prey. That thing out there is not prey. It is a monster." Crix hit the hunter across the face, knocking him to the ground. "It is one human," the High Elder snarled. "One soft, clawless, fangless human. And you let it kill 8 of our best hunters. This is a disgrace that will be remembered for generations." David smiled at that. Good. Let them be angry. Angry hunters made mistakes, but David was not stupid. He knew that 30 fresh soldiers with advanced weapons were a different challenge than 20 overconfident sport hunters. He could not fight them the same way. He needed a new plan. For 2 days, David avoided all contact. He moved constantly, never staying in one place for more than an hour. He used rivers and rocky ground to hide his tracks. He covered himself in mud and plants to block the thermal scanners. He became a ghost in the jungle, always one step ahead of the hunters. But he was also working. Every night, while the Varth slept, David was busy. He studied the jungle more carefully than before. He found a canyon with steep walls, where a river had cut through the rock over thousands of years. He found caves full of small creatures that looked like insects but were the size of cats. He found plants that exploded when touched, shooting sharp seeds in all directions. He found everything dangerous in this jungle, and he memorized where it was. On the 5th day, Crix grew impatient. He ordered all hunters to spread out and push toward the canyon. His thermal scanners had detected heat signatures there, probably David trying to hide. Crix wanted this finished. He wanted to bring the human's body back to his ship and show everyone that the Varth were still the apex predators of the galaxy. David was waiting for them. He had spent 2 days preparing the canyon. He had dug pits and covered them with leaves and branches. He had set up tripwires attached to those exploding plants. He had captured dozens of the cat-sized insects and put them in containers made from large leaves. Those insects, he had learned, were full of venom that made the Varth sick and weak. Most importantly, he had found the one spot where the canyon walls came close together, a narrow passage about 3 meters wide. If the Varth wanted to follow him, they would have to go through that passage, and David would be waiting on the other side. The hunters came at midday, moving in 3 groups of 10 plus, the 12 survivors from the original hunt. Crix stayed back with a small guard, watching from a safe distance. The thermal scanners showed David's heat signature deep in the canyon, near the river. The hunters moved in confidently, certain that they had finally cornered their prey. The first group hit the traps. 2 hunters fell into the pits and landed on sharpened stakes. 3 more triggered the exploding plants and went down screaming, their faces and eyes torn by the seeds. The others scattered in confusion, firing their plasma rifles at nothing. David watched from above as panic spread through their ranks. He had climbed to a ledge high on the canyon wall, hidden behind rocks. The Varth could not see him. They could not smell him. The venom from the insects covered his scent. They did not know where the attack was coming from. He opened the containers of insects and let them fall. The creatures landed on the hunters below, biting and stinging. The Varth screamed and tried to brush them off, but there were too many. The venom worked fast. Within minutes, the hunters were stumbling and falling, their muscles weak and their vision blurred. David dropped from his ledge and moved through them like death itself. His knife found throats and joints and soft spots under arms. His pistol barked in short, controlled bursts, 1 shot, 1 kill. never wasting ammunition. He was fast and precise, a lifetime of training coming together in this one moment. When the first wave was finished, 15 more Vorath were dead or dying. David had used 6 bullets, but the fight was not over. The second and third groups had heard the screaming. They came running, weapons ready, and now they knew where David was. They opened fire on the canyon, plasma bolts turning rocks to molten slag. David ran. He sprinted through the narrow passage, just ahead of the plasma fire. Bolts hit the walls around him, showering him with hot stone. One bolt grazed his arm, burning through his shirt and searing the skin beneath. The pain was incredible, but David did not stop. He could not stop. He burst out of the passage and kept running along the river. Behind him, he heard the Vorath following. They were faster than him. Their legs were longer, their bodies built for running. He could not outrun them, but he did not need to. David reached the edge of a cliff where the river became a waterfall. The water dropped 50 meters into a pool below. The Vorath stopped behind him, weapons raised. Certain they had won. Krix pushed through the crowd, his yellow eyes gleaming with triumph. "Nowhere left to run, human," he said. "Your hunt is over." David turned to face them. His arm was bleeding. His body was exhausted. He had 12 bullets left. "You're right," David said. "No more running." He raised his pistol and fired 3 times. 3 hunters dropped, shots straight through their eyes, the only spot where their armor and scales did not protect them. The others fired back, but David was already falling. He had jumped backward off the cliff into the waterfall, letting the water carry him down. The fall should have killed him. Any normal fall from that height would break bones and destroy organs. But David knew something the Vorath did not. He had explored this waterfall days ago. He knew the pool below was deep, very deep, and that the current would pull him into an underwater cave that came out half a mile downstream. The cold water hit him like a giant fist, but he held his breath and let the current take him. Above, he heard the Vorath screaming in rage. He heard plasma fire hitting the water, but they could not follow him here. They were too heavy, too bulky, too slow in the water. David swam through the darkness of the underwater cave, his lungs burning, his wounded arm throbbing. Just when he thought he could not hold his breath any longer, he saw a light ahead. He pushed toward it and burst out of the water into the open air of the jungle. He crawled onto the riverbank and lay there for a long moment, gasping for breath. His arm was still bleeding. His body ached in 100 places. But he was alive. He checked his pistol. 6 bullets left. His knife was still on his belt. Behind him, far up the river, he could hear the Vorath searching for his body. They would not find it. They would think he was dead, drowned in the waterfall. They were wrong. David stood up on shaking legs and looked at the sky. The sun was setting. One more day. Just one more day, and he would win. He would survive. He started walking into the jungle, leaving no tracks behind him. The hunt was almost over, but not in the way the Vorath expected. The 7th day began with rain. Heavy drops fell from the orange sky, making the jungle come alive with sound. The purple leaves danced under the water. The rivers swelled and rushed faster. Everything was wet and loud and perfect for hiding. David Park walked through the rain without hurrying. His wounded arm was wrapped in leaves that had natural healing properties. He had found them on the 3rd day and saved them for when he needed them. The burn was still painful, but the leaves kept it clean and helped it heal. He had spent the 6th day resting and preparing. He knew where the Vorath extraction point was. He had heard them talking about it on the communication devices. A clearing on the eastern edge of the jungle, where a shuttle would pick up the survivors at sunset on the 7th day. Win or lose, that was where the hunt would end. David intended to be there. Through the communication device, he had listened to the Vorath count their dead. 34 hunters killed in 6 days. Only 8 remained from the original 42. Vaughn was dead. David had killed him in the canyon attack. Most of the reinforcements were dead too. The survivors were scared and broken, no longer talking about hunting or sport or glory. They just wanted to go home. But Crix was still alive. The High Elder had stayed back from the fighting, letting his hunters die while he watched from safety. And Crix was not scared. He was angry. He was humiliated. And he wanted revenge. David listened as Crix made a speech to the survivors. "One human," the High Elder said, his voice shaking with rage. "One soft, weak human has done this to us. This cannot stand. We will find him. We will kill him. And we will make sure the galaxy knows that the Varath are still the greatest hunters who ever lived." The survivors did not respond. They were too tired, too broken, too afraid. But they would follow Crix because they had no choice. He was their leader, and in Vorath culture, disobeying a High Elder was worse than death. David almost felt sorry for them. Almost. As the sun rose higher, David made his way toward the extraction point. He moved slowly and carefully, avoiding the patrols of hunters that Crix had sent out. There were only 8 hunters, plus Crix himself, easy to avoid if you knew the jungle well. And David knew this jungle better than anyone now. He reached the clearing at midday and studied it from the tree line. It was about 100 meters wide, with short purple grass and a few scattered rocks. The shuttle would land in the center. The Varath would gather there to leave, and David would be waiting. He spent hours preparing. He dug a shallow pit and covered it with grass. He positioned large rocks that he could use as cover. He found the best angle for shooting and the best path for retreat if things went wrong. He did everything he could to give himself an advantage. Then he sat down in the shadows and waited. The sun began to set. The rain stopped and the clouds broke apart to show the orange and red sky. It was beautiful in a strange alien way. David wondered if he would ever see the blue sky of Earth again. He heard them coming before he saw them. The 8 surviving hunters moved into the clearing first, weapons raised, eyes scanning everything. They had learned to be careful. They had learned that this human was not prey. Crix came last, walking slowly with a plasma rifle in his hands. The High Elder looked older than before, his scales dull and his eyes tired. The past 6 days had taken something from him, something he would never get back. The hunters spread out in a defensive circle around the clearing. They were expecting an attack. They were ready for anything except what happened next. David stood up from the tree line and walked toward them. He did not run. He did not hide. He simply walked out of the shadows and into the open, his knife in one hand and his pistol in the other. The hunters spun toward him, weapons raised. But they did not fire. They were too shocked. They had spent 6 days hunting this human, and now he was walking toward them like he had nothing to fear. David stopped about 20 meters from Crix. The two of them looked at each other across the clearing. "You survived," Crix said. His voice was strange, a mixture of anger and something else. Something that might have been respect. David nodded. 7 days? That was the deal. I survived 7 days, and you returned me to Earth. Crix made a sound that was almost a laugh. You killed 34 of my hunters. You think I'm going to let you go? You think you've won? Yes, David said simply. I do. Crix raised his plasma rifle. You have 6 bullets and a knife. I have 8 hunters with plasma weapons. How exactly do you think this ends? David smiled. It was the same smile he had given Crix on the first day, when this all began. It ends with you learning something, David said. Something your people have forgotten. He took a step forward. The hunters tensed but did not fire. They were waiting for Crix's order. You've been apex predators for 10,000 years, David continued. You've hunted everything in this galaxy. And you got lazy. You got comfortable. You forgot that being at the top of the food chain doesn't mean you're safe. It just means you haven't met the thing that will knock you down yet. Another step forward. My species has been fighting since before we had language. We killed each other. We killed animals. We killed anything that threatened us. And we didn't do it because we were strong. We did it because we refused to die. Crix's grip on his rifle tightened. Pretty speech. But you're still one human against 9 Vorath. David stopped walking. He was 10 meters from Crix now. Close enough to see the fear in the High Elder's yellow eyes. Look at your hunters, David said. Really look at them. Crix glanced at the 8 survivors. They were shaking. Their weapons were trembling in their hands. One of them, a young female named Tira, had tears running down her scaled face. They're broken, David said. I broke them. Not with guns or knives, but with fear. I showed them that they could die. That all their strength and speed and claws meant nothing against someone who was willing to do whatever it took to survive. He raised his pistol slowly, pointing it at Crix's head. So here's what's gonna happen. You're going to honor our deal. You're going to take me back to Earth, and you're going to tell everyone in your galaxy that humans are not prey. We are not weak. We are the most dangerous species you have ever encountered, because we will never stop fighting. We will never give up. And we will burn everything down before we let someone take what is ours. Silence fell over the clearing. The wind blew through the purple grass. Somewhere in the jungle, a strange bird called out. Crix lowered his rifle. If I let you go, the High Elder said quietly, my people will never forgive me. Then don't tell them the truth, David replied. Tell them I died. Tell them your hunters killed me on the 7th day. Tell them whatever you want. But we both know what really happened here, and you'll spend the rest of your life remembering it. Crix stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, the High Elder stepped aside and gestured toward the shuttle that was descending from the sky. Go, Crix said. Go back to your world. But know this, human. If we ever meet again, we won't, David interrupted. Because you're going to warn every hunter in your empire about what happens when you hunt humans. You're going to tell them about the soft creature with no claws who killed 34 Vorath with 30 bullets and a knife. And they're going to believe you, because they can see it in your eyes. David walked past Crix toward the shuttle. The hunters parted before him, not meeting his gaze. He climbed into the shuttle and sat down in a seat meant for aliens, twice his size dot, as the door closed and the shuttle lifted off. David looked out the window at the jungle below. Somewhere down there, 34 Vorath hunters lay dead. The greatest predators in the galaxy, killed by one man who refused to be prey. The shuttle rose through the atmosphere and into the darkness of space. Stars appeared in the window, millions of them, each one holding worlds that David would never see. But that was fine. He was going home. He was going back to Alaska, to the quiet forests and the cold, clean air. He was going to find his camera and his tent and go back to photographing wolves. And somewhere out there, in the dark, between the stars, the Vorath would tell stories about him. Stories about the human who showed them what fear really meant. Stories that would spread across the galaxy, warning every hunter and every predator about the soft creatures from Sol-3. Do not hunt the humans. They are not prey. They never were.